Welcome to this presentation on papermaking in Europe and America, 1493 to the present. I'm Molly Dorman, the curator for this exhibit that will be on display in special collections in the Vanderbilt Library. I want to share with you information about some of the outstanding examples of papermaking and its history that come from our libraries. But first, a bit of background on this vast subject of a commodity that changed the world. It is well established that paper making was first done by the Chinese as early as 200 BCE. It was such an important craft, and paper was used for so many things, including toilet tissue for the royal dynasties, that it was kept a secret for over 800 years. It is believed that at the Battle of Talas on the western border of China in the year 751, some Chinese papermakers were taken prisoner and forced to share with their captors the secrets of making this extraordinarily useful product. Paper mills were soon thereafter established all over the Islamic world, at Baghdad in 793, then at Damascus, Cairo, and then west to Fez by 1100. And from there, paper making moved north into Islamic Spain, where the first stamping mill was macerating linen rags for making paper at Zativa in 1151. The paper mills at Fabriana, Italy, a name which some of you may know because these mills still make artist papers today, were first mentioned in 1276. In 1390, Ullmann Stromer established the first paper mill north of the Alps at Nuremberg, Germany. And this is where we get our first glimpse through woodcuts in the Liber Chronicarum of 1493 of what his mill looked like. As with most paper mills, it is beside a source of fresh water, a spring or stream, and as is the case here, the paper mill is located outside the walls of the city due to the noise and the stench. You will notice the mill in the lower right-hand corner of the woodcut in this facsimile reproduction of the city of Nuremberg. Although not on display, the library is proud to own a Latin version of the 1493 Nuremberg Chronicle, which was given to us in 1966 by Jesse Wills. Our copy has recently been conserved and restored, and its pages, now over 500 years old, are remarkably fresh and bright, a characteristic of papers made by hand of linen rags in Europe in the 15th century. The recto and verso of a single leaf from a 1493 Liber Chronicarum. Another item on display, also over 500 years old, is a letter written by King Ferdinand of Castile and Aragon. Paper evidence suggests that this letter was written circa 1505 and that the paper was made at a mill in Perpignan in the southwest of France near the Spanish border. We know this because we have been able to identify the watermark on this paper, a hand holding a stem topped by a star or flower. To make this identification, we used the great tool of the 4-volume directory compiled by Charles Briquet called Les Filigrammes. First published in 1907, this reference work identifies over 16,000 watermarks from paper made in Europe between the years 1282 to 1600. On the left is the Briquet page in the classification hands, or main in French, and on the right you can see the watermark on the letter, which matches. So what are watermarks? This fascinating and vast world with within the paper-making industry? Watermarks are wires sewn into the paper-making molds in simple, or in some cases, extraordinarily complex and artistic designs. As the wet pulp dries to become paper, the wire designs make the paper thinner at those points, and when held to the light, these designs are translucent. Watermarks can be useful as bibliographic evidence for establishing a date and place where the paper was made. Watermarks can also be a great abyss of false turnings and dissolving perspectives. However, when you make a match, as we did with this letter from King Ferdinand, The effort is entirely rewarded, your feeling of achievement is sublime, and we can only be in awe of the efforts of Briquet and a host of others who have devoted lifetimes to identifying watermarks. Let me turn your attention to another rare treasure on display, a volume from the first edition of Denis Diderot's Encyclopedia, a masterpiece in 17 folio volumes from the late 18th century, and one of the supreme productions of the Enlightenment and Age of Reason in France. By the middle of the 18th century, paper mills all over Europe were not only widespread, but indispensable, and so worthy of many pages of engraved illustrations in the encyclopedia. The two engraved plates here depict an idealized paper mill surrounded by its water source and powered by a water wheel seen in the foreground. This is another plate from the encyclopedia which illustrates the drying racks in a paper mill. We have other examples from the late 18th century, but this time from America. A letter written by Robert Morris shortly before his signing of the Constitution of the United States in September 1787. The paper that possibly was made in America, or it could be paper imported from Great Britain, is fine-grade handmade writing paper with the signature of one of America's founding fathers who also signed the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation. Another important rare book in the Vanderbilt libraries is the Journal of the Proceedings of the Congress held at Philadelphia, September 5th, 1774. It was printed by Thomas and William Bradford at the London Coffee House, a gathering place and economic exchange in Philadelphia. Here on the title page, you see the imprinted circle with 12 hands holding up Magna Carta and with a Latin inscription which translates to, "We hold this, Magna Carta, as precedent." In the fledgling nation, the demands for all kinds of paper for printing books such as this journal, documents, pamphlets, newspapers, ream papers, and other brown wrapping paper, fine writing papers, meant that in the 150 years between 1690 and 1832, over 500 paper mills were established and operated throughout America. Most of them were in Pennsylvania and Massachusetts. Some of them were destroyed by fire or flood or the collapse of the owners' fortunes. And all of them were always in need of linen and cotton rags to produce the paper that was empowering America and the new republic. In fact, Save Rags was the watermark for one Massachusetts mill. It is worth noting that immigrants to America facing persecution in Europe for religious and other beliefs brought their paper-making skills with them to the new land. Let us turn for a moment to the actual work that goes on in a paper mill, and in this case, a particular paper mill in Kent, England, Hale Mill, which against all the odds was owned and operated by the Barcham Green family for 6 generations from 1808 to 1987. These photographs come from the Hale Mill archives and put a human face on the production of quality handmade paper for use by printers, artists, and fine book presses. Although the paper products are beautiful in their own right, the production quotas to meet demand and ensure profits for the owners required highly skilled workers who put in long hours, back-breaking and repetitive work, and who had to consistently and quickly produce high-quality papers without blemish. They need a great source of clean, fresh, pure water, either a stream or a spring, and Kent, England has this water in abundance for the many mills that have operated there. In these photographs, you will see the variety of workers who are a part of the paper-making team, each indispensable to the other. Here we are at the rag house, filled with large bags of rags which will need to be sorted by quality, type of fabric, and color. The rag sorters must be able to quickly determine the quality and condition of the fabric and the kind of paper that it will make. The rags will have formation liquid added, and then these machines, often called Hollanders because of their Dutch origins, will beat the mixture to a pulp, which is then ready for the vat. Here we are at the vat. The vat man is giving the mold a shake to help the water drain out quickly. The top decal holds the liquid mixture in place. To make consistently excellent sheets of paper requires great skill. At the heart of the paper making process are these three. The vat man, you'll see him here on the far right, who handles forming the sheet from wet pulp in the mold and decal. The coucher in the middle, who transfers the newly formed and wet sheet by couching it to the felt on a stack, and the layer to the far left, who forms the stack of papers that will then go to be pressed and later dried and fully inspected. This stack of papers is called a post. All this happens quickly and seamlessly, time after time, for a full day's work. The drying process requires a large loft full of warm air and with racks for the large sheets of paper. Papers that have been sized require their own special drying places. At the end of this very labor-intensive process is the picking room, where trained eyes will inspect the finished product. Note the bank of windows that allow the workers to see any imperfections or specks and blemishes in the paper. Up until about the first half of the 20th century, it was common to see horse-drawn carts delivering the reams of paper from the mill to the train station and then out to bookbinders, printers, and stationers, and all the others who are buying these papers. There are a couple of names in our modern world that will always be associated with papermaking: William Morris and Dart Hunter. Morris, in the arts and crafts movement in England in the late 19th century, advocated for a return to the making of quality craft, paper, and book products in the new age of cheap mass production. For his Kelmscott press, he insisted on having paper made of linen rags, a requirement specifically citing as his model an Italian paper of 1473, which Mr. Batchelor, a paper maker in Kent, made quite satisfactorily. His statement on these requirements are in his book, The Art and Craft of Printing, from our Nettie Hill Rand Fine Bindings collection. Dart Hunter, an American, was 13 years old when William Morris died in 1896. He invested his considerable energies and personal fortune in setting up printing presses, making paper, and traveling the globe with the intention of learning all he could about the history and process of making paper by hand. As the author of over 20 books, he is recognized as the foremost authority on paper and paper making. Timothy Barrett, himself a master paper maker and expert, says that above all else, Dart Hunter's real contribution was to show us the incredible rich heritage of paper making. Kathleen Baker's By His Own Labor, the biography of Dart Hunter, is showcased in the exhibit and was published by the Red Hydra Press, a fine press out of Alabama. This book is part of our Sam Fleming Southern Civilization collection. Our collections include the works of modern paper makers Claire Van Vliet, Donna and Peter Thomas, and Beverly Plummer. Claire Van Vliet, founder of the Janus Press, is a book artist and a paper artist and a paper maker. Her Janus Press published Papermaking at Hale Mill, 1808 to 1987, and she has designed watermarks used in Janus Press publications. She often uses the paper made by Twin Rocker Paper, founded by Howard and Catherine Clark and based in Indiana. Vanderbilt University Special Collections and the Library of Congress have comprehensive collections of Claire Van Vliet's work. Peter and Donna Thomas, based in Santa Cruz, California, are itinerant book artists who have traveled the globe and have studied papermaking in Europe and America. Peter often makes his own paper for the books that he and Donna produce, and he often acknowledges his debt to Dart Hunter. Beverly Plummer is a Nashvilleian and a book artist and paper artist whose experiments in papermaking include the use of unique and unusual plant fibers. In one of her paper and bookmaker projects, she has explored the ancient I Ching through the music of contemporary composer John Cage. Her papers are held by special collections and include examples of her and others' handmade papers. These words sum up the mystery of paper and papermaking. Before we end, just a couple of other notes. Linen is at the heart of early papermaking and imparts an enduring spirit and quality to the papers of the 14th and 15th centuries. Just as papermaking by hand is a multi-step and laborious process, so is the making of linen thread from the flax plant, which has been cultivated since ancient times and woven into fabric that will eventually become rags to make paper. Even linen wrappings for mummies from ancient Egypt have been used to make paper. Finally, we have a word. Turns out the only word about paper mills in Shakespeare, through his character Jack Cade, leader of a rebellion against the king in Henry VI, Part 2. Thou hast most traitorously corrupted the youth of the realm in erecting a grammar school, and whereas before our forefathers had no other books but the score and the tally, thou hast caused printing to be used, and contrary to the king, his crown, and dignity, thou hast built a paper mill. Please come visit us in special collections and see some of these outstanding examples of papermaking.